And Liverpool's a city to make your pulses leap. Enthroned beside the racing tide, a river broad and deep, where the ships of all the nations bring rich notes from all the seas. And the harbour lights glitter all the night, and the waves dance to the breeze. And the Liverpool varsity, oh, that is the place for me. With the great city's colour and light to the core in the Liverpool varsity. The students of our college on a brisk and lively crew. What they don't know, acknowledge, and there's nothing that they can't do. But if you want to know, then you should come and hear them sing. For they're the ones to raise the noise that will make the rafters sing. In the Liverpool varsity, oh, that is the place for me. I shall never forget the good friends that I've met in the Liverpool varsity.
I'm not a big statue on people person, never have been, because then it becomes all about that one person, or that one thing. And another thing a lot of people don't realise is that the Muslim community don't do statues, they don't do faces. To them, there's only one face. I mean, that's a bit blank to me because I'm an atheist. You would be an atheist getting christened a Protestant. Being only in Liverpool, can you get named Yusuf? Christened Yusuf, the Protestant, and put in the Orange Lodge. Thanks very much, Nan. Anyway, I changed my name to Joe. Hope Place, the Unity Theatre, used to be a synagogue there. We used to play football. And because it was under the archway, we could play football three-a-side when it was raining. One day the rabbis come out, and he was cool with us playing football. And he said, Yusuf, do you know what Yusuf means in Hebrew? And I went, no, I'm only 10 now. And he said, Yusuf means Joseph. And then Jimi Hendrix came out with Hey Joe. And I just went, I'm calling myself Joe. It didn't change for the first couple of years, but a few years after that, I started asking people, to call me Joe, not Joseph, just Joe. And then around 73, 74, more and more people were calling me Joe. But my family called me Yusuf. I said, you call me Yusuf again, I'm not going to answer you. It's Joe. Jimi Hendrix said I can be called Joe. I don't know too much about my Irish connections. My grandmother on my mother's side, Mary Ellen, her family wanted absolutely nothing to do with her when she met my grandfather. They were Protestant Belfast people, and he was, a light-skinned Egyptian guy with a name like Ali Hussein. So, after that, they had nothing to do with us, and we had nothing to do with them. And even when she died, we got in contact for the funeral, but again, there was no response. So that's the Irish side. In terms of roots, my father was from North Sudan. My father. He's not really my father, he's just, somebody beside me. My grandfather, Ali, was a seaman, a merchant seaman. He came to Liverpool and he was in and out of different places. And the people of colour then, I'll use that term, went to Liverpool 1. Because that's where the black community was. It wasn't Liverpool 8. It was over by the Pitt Street area, which is where my grandmother lived. And, she was a cleaner in the dentist there. And, he was probably staying in Seaman's Hostel over in Cannon Place and then later on in Pitt Street. And, they met. And, whatever, yeah. Happy days. Moved on. I never met him, my grandfather. He died during the Battle of the Atlantic, 1943. there was no records really. Me and my uncle, he was born 1939, 1940, applied for the medals, but we just couldn't get them. Every time we asked, there was like, there's no person of this name. We then discovered they had the names backwards. So, you know, we applied and we got the medals a couple of years later, and my uncle gave them to me. But to me, it's not just the fact of the medals. It's about the recognition of the human being. You know, it gives you something to think about in future, something to inform your kids. You know, especially being a person of colour, a black person. It's like recognising the fact of, you know, we're here yet we're part of it. So let's just move on. It all started, you know, early, wondering. We went down to London with my son, who was 5, you know, he's 20 now. It was the first time to Tower Hill. And, you know, my granddad's name's on the monument there. And it was basically to, you know, show him his heritage, in a sense. And I think basically that's what kicked off my interest in it, contrary to what one or two people might think. You know, I don't do these things with the First World War, the Second World War, blah, 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 you know. No, it's not. It's about recognising, you know, the human being, the people who have fought in them wars, you know, been a part of it for whatever reason. I mean, people don't even realise the amount of women that were on the fields in those days. There was thousands and thousands of women, and they don't get a mention. You know, it's always the men at war. And I think it's irritating in a sense, you know, because, you know, they knew they was there, but they didn't recognise them because they were women. You're not in the same category, so to speak. You've all heard of that saying, there ain't no black in the Union Jack. Well, I've done this before, right? I've got my black felt tip pen and I draw all the lines on the Union flag in black. So there is black in the Union Jack. When people say things, it never goes over my head. Racist things, you know, in terms of football and that. It never went over my head. I just ended up fighting against it. Because what I do is aimed at the people where it's coming from. That's why I like to work on the white working class estates. You know, Lickers Lane, John's Estate, West Edover in Kirby. And I like to work with the young white people. And it's not, you know, to preach about what it's like being black, but it's like, you know, to help them with their problems, their issues, you know, help them move on with it, especially coming from a black person. And I'd love if one day one of those were like, you know, they're not all like that, because, you know, there was this one lad and he helped me out, and, you know, to me, that's the start of a movement. A lot of that came from discussions at Greenham Common, where I went many, many, many years ago, when the women were surrounding the fence. I took my son, me, my wife at the time, and my son. You know, we stood there and we was holding hands. And it was the first time, you know, it was the first time I started to listen to people about, you know, being abused and offended in different ways. Mainly women. But you know what? Them women are icons, because they kicked it all off again. I can't think of any single person who said this is toxic before 1981. Toxic was only mentioned in 1981 when the press came and said riots in Toxic. And that's because when they came, they saw a big sign that said this is Toxic, but no one ever called it Toxic. No one had ever called it Toxic. It was always Liverpool 8 or the South End. I mean, even people north of the city, they never called it Toxic. It was always Liverpool 8 or the South End. It was a Liverpool thing, you know. We tend to go by postcodes. And one of the reasons why I think Liverpool 8 stuck, well, not one of the reasons, but one of the reasons was if you applied for a job and you was from Liverpool 8, it was highly unlikely that you'd get a job interview because it was the black community. And yes, even though there was 60% white people living there as well, I found this on later by research, they were getting treated exactly the same. They used the postcodes as a way of, knowing things. Okay. It was an uprising. Now, I'm not teaching you things. It was an uprising because of the way we was abused and treated by the police. I was there. And there were white lads there with us as well, fighting with us. And, they came from all over the city because the white lads in Liverpool 8 were getting treated very similar. Only a few years before, late 75, I was walking with my wife down Selborne Street. And, she'd gone to doctors and I'd gone to shops. And, she came out, she was like 30 yards ahead. And a car pulls over and I heard her shout, "No, I'm not, bugger off." So I flew down and, the car's still there. And I said, "What's up?" He's just asked me how much. She's obviously pregnant. She's 7 months pregnant. So, I just kicked the car. Unbeknown to me, it was a police car, an unmarked police car. It had the thing on the dashboard, the telephone, we just reached it and grabbed it and then sped off. And I turned and she's just gone, "He's just asked me how much." I said, "I'm not a prostitute. What are you doing? Go away." But these things were typical. They'd done these type of things to mess with us. And then it'd all kick off again. When it happened, we was in the pub on the Masonic watching a band on Berry Street, and somebody just flew in the pub and went, "It's all kicking off outside the Rialto." We went, "What?" He went, "There's loads of police and there's murders everywhere." The pub just emptied. Everyone went along to the Rialto, along Dew Street, and just got involved. And it was a natural thing to do because what was happening, we didn't want what was happening to happen to our kids. You just don't want that for anybody. It was the newspapers who put race riots in Toxic, blah, 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 race riots. It was an anti-police thing. It wasn't white people versus black people. Well, in a sense it was because, the police were white. Well, most of them. The Merseyside police were very, very clever. And on the second night, they drafted in the force from Manchester. That's what they did. They put them on the front line. And our arguments wasn't necessarily with them. But it continued. I can't draw a straight line, but if Joseph Beuys says anybody can be an artist, well, it's about creativity. A simple thing for a simple man. So, put it up and get it done. That's why we put the statue in Falkner Square. I was reading something last Christmas and they were going to do a memorial on the 50th anniversary of the Battle of the Atlantic. And I thought, I want to do something. So I contacted Vesti. Edmund Vestey. He's a Queen's representative for the memorials for the north of England, you know, from Birmingham up. And, you know, it was supposed to be the cenotaph for Liverpool, but I contacted him and he answered, and I said, you know, I want to do something for the black merchant seamen. And he said, we lost 600 men, many of whom were black, and he was waiting from somebody from one of the communities to do it. And something like that, memorials, should come from the people that, you know, they're there to commemorate. So basically, I went down, I contacted the council, I went down and I picked a stone from the archway of Seaman Home, which is it's knocked down now, but all the stones were stacked up on the street, just thrown away. But that was the only listed part. So we got a stone and we got my friend to come in a van and move it. It was bloody heavy. And we got a plaque made. And we got, you know, seaman, a merchant seaman, an old merchant seaman from the old people's home across the way, a black merchant seaman, and Vestey came and he unveiled it. And, you know, unbeknown to us, you know, we didn't know he had to go to Leeds and Newcastle. He came back to Liverpool that same night, around 9 o'clock, walked into the hall and was just chatting with everybody. This is Vestey. And he said he was just happy that, you know, the stone was there for the black merchant seaman, that he just had to come back. People ask me, is it just about African or Caribbean? No, I'm old school. Black to me is non-white. I should say the reason why it went into Falkner Square is because that's where all the consulates were. All the consulates in Liverpool were in Falkner Square. And you know, that's where people would go. And you know, even the ones who were maybe coming up on a ship and you know, they had to get a stamp for whatever reason, you know, that's where they went. And that included the people from Africa. It just felt like, you know, the right place to be. And the reason for the stone is that, you know, a lot of the seamen that went to Seamen's Hostel died there. So the stone felt real. It was their gravestone, because if a ship sunk, there's no way of remembering the gravestone. But in a park, you know, you've got benches and people can come and, you know, remember their grandfathers, fathers, possibly mothers at the same time. I don't know. It's a bit for me as well, which is, you know, at the top of the memoriam there's a tiny little ship, and you know, tiny little writing, it says Fort Concord, which is the ship what my grandfather went down on. But it's meant to represent all ships, you know. It's just a merchant ship, but it's a memory, you know, and it's there to remember the people that had bugger all to do with the start of it, but a lot to do with the end of it. Finishing wars, you know, and stopping wars, and having people, you know, to go out and die. You know, and I've done all this without a CSE. I refused to take any exams. I think that was the Marxist in me. Yeah, you don't need the state to tell you, you know, that you're a smart ass. And I said, well, I don't remember enough of the exam at the end. And that's the Marxist way of me saying, no, I'm not doing that because of that. I can go on for years, as you'd gathered, But I'm not going to write a book, am I?